lovely way to begin. Good morning. I'm Ginger Bryan. I'm the facilitator for this morning. And today's service is a little unusual. It was put together with the BAJA for participants. And its intention is to welcome the new contract minister at Borderlands, Reverend Inga Detweiler. Yeah, right. She wrote that out phonetically for me because it's but I ask your patience because the agenda's a little different. It reminds me of last weekend. I went to a memorial service at St. Pat's Church in Bisbee. You talk about not knowing what to do. They answer things, they have responsive things, and you stand up and sit down and yell. I was a you the whole time. Okay, if you have cell phones, please put them on airplane mode or turn them off. And if you have an announcement for now or a joy and sorrow for a bit later, please fill out a form and someone will bring it to me. I want to welcome you all here this morning, as well as those on Zoom. If you're willing and able, would you stand and wave to our friends electronically? Last week, I also had the pleasure of talking to a UU friend from Oregon, and she gave me 3 little tidbits of information I'll share with you this morning. But one of them was about Zoom calling. And she's in healthcare, and she had applied for a job, and it was really important to her. So she's on the Zoom call, and the interviewer says to her, "Tell me something about the background." Well, Lori went on, and she said, "Oh, I was raised here, and I went to school here, and I have children, and blah, 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 blah." So the interviewer waited for her to finish, and he said, I was asking about that plant on the shelf behind you." Okay. So she told me the story, and I have to share this with you because I think it's apropos. How many UUs does it take to screw in a light bulb? Yeah. She says the answer is 300. You need 12 to sit on the board which appoints the nominating and the personnel committee. You need 5 to sit on the nominating personnel committee, which appoints the House committee. You need 8 to sit on the House committee, which appoints the light bulb changing committee. 4 are needed to sit on the light bulb changing committee, which chooses who will screw in the light bulb. 3 of those 4 then give their own opinion of screwing in methods. While someone actually does the installation. After completion, it takes 100 individuals to complain about the method of installation. Another 177 debate the ecological impact of using the light bulb at all. And at least one insisted that back in her day, a lit chalice was sufficient. Okay, yeah, I'll tell Lori you liked that. Okay, if you are new here, please ask any one of us if how to access our website or how to get involved in our activities. Remember, we have lots of committees that need participants. If you would like to receive the newsletter, please ask Deborah Smith, is she here today, or Becky Tanner to get on the list. And the last little tidbit from Lori was, you may already be a UU if on Halloween you explain to everyone the pagan significance of their costumes. if you know at least 2 people who are upset that trees had to die for your church to be built, that sounds like somebody from Bisbee. If you consider Millard Fillmore one of the greatest U.S. presidents, he was a Unitarian, right, Richard? He's shaking his head back there. If you think the Holy Trinity is reduce, reuse, and recycle. And the last one was a little esoteric, and that is if you hear somebody talk about owl, you don't think about the bird first, right? All right, announcements. April 5th is the first Friday outing to Patagonia Lake. RSVPs would be greatly appreciated for the boat trip. Also, please let Molly know if you have a state park pass. There are birthday cards for April out on the table in the community room. Are there any other announcements? No. Okay. We have a welcome and a call to worship on video from Reverend Bethany Russell Lowell.
This year, as we have been studying the proposed changes to Article 2 of the Unitarian Universalist Association's bylaws, I have been directing my attention, my study towards those values that feel new in this proposal. One of those new values is generosity. The proposed Article 2 defines the UU of value of generosity this way. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. On March 7th, 2020, just over 4 years ago, I sent an email to Reverend Matthew Funk Crary, Reverend Tina Squire, and Reverend Samantha Wilson. The title of that email was BAJA for Zoom Worship, ? In that email, I proposed that we think about doing a Zoom worship all together in light of the trickling in recommendations that we not gather in person for a few weeks or more. The idea was met with 3 enthusiastic yeses. I love it. I'm in. Great idea. And Reverend Tina also wrote, thank you for thinking outside the box and finding some tiny positive possibility in the midst of something ominous. That's when amazing things happen in churches, I find. Well, Reverend Tina was prescient, or perhaps prophetic. Amazing things did happen. We ended up worshiping together for over 18 months. Our worship staff met together weekly, and your ministers continue to meet weekly for collegial and congregational support. I come back to the value of generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. Our BAJA 4, these past 4 years, has been the embodiment of generosity. Throughout the pandemic, throughout that time of upheaval and anxiety, our work together cultivated a spirit of gratitude and hope, both in us and in many of you. We shared and continue to share our resources tallying the relationships we are building across congregations rather than how many hours each congregation has contributed to our shared project. And through our work together, we have felt our interdependence with one another, our mutuality of relationship. We said over and over again, we are stronger together. And that was then and still is so true. In at least a couple of our congregations, we are in the midst of our annual pledge drive, our stewardship campaign. This is a time when we are encouraging you to invest in your congregations to help it maintain and grow and thrive. And I want to offer a framework rooted in the value of generosity that I read a few times. When you invest in your congregations, you are investing in the BAJA 4. Because if we are stronger together, if we truly believe that, then our strength as a BAJA 4 is interdependent with the strength of the congregation or congregations that you belong to and that you give to. When one of us thrives, we all thrive. So give generously to your congregation or congregations this year. We are counting on you. Throughout this service, you will hear different reflections on generosity from other ministers. And we are inviting you to go to menti.com and put in the code that you'll see at the bottom of this screen. When you're at Menti, you're going to submit your answer to this question. In one word, how do you practice generosity as a Unitarian Universalist? In one word, how do you practice generosity as a Unitarian Universalist? And again, if you want to submit your answer to that, you can go to menti.com and put in the code that's at the bottom of this screen. Welcome to this celebration of what the BAJA 4 has been, is now, and could be. Come, let us worship together.
This is the 4th out of 5 weeks of our stewardship. For the month of March, we were doing this game in February too, but we have 1 week left. I'm proud to say that this week we received donations of $10,000, or promises of donations of $10,000. So we are now at the sum total of $79,740. That is more than was pledged last year by, I don't know, $40, $50. So we have reached last year's. But we still need to go more, because the other part of the income that we expect is from these cash donations that go out every Sunday, and they're not in the pledge category. The cash is just cash. And that's not a lot of money that we receive. Most of the money that we receive is from the pledges. So I would like to see us get up here further. And you got one more week, then I'll quit talking. I'll quit giving you the Baptist stuff. So, our chalice lighting comes from Katie Savannah Gelfand. These names are really difficult. She is the Director of Religious Exploration in the congregation that raised her, the First Unitarian Universalist Church of New Orleans. Concurrent to this ministry, she is also a certified spiritual guide, Reiki master, teacher, and ritualist. We light our chalice as a symbol of gratitude as we celebrate the abundance of our lives together. In this sanctuary, we harvest bushels of strength for one another and offer our crop with the hands of compassion and generosity. In the authentic and gentle manner of our connections, we cultivate a simple sweetness to brighten our souls. May we be grateful for the ways we nourish and uplift each other, for it is the sharing of this hallowed time together that sustains us.
This month, the BAJA 4 has been considering the concept of generosity. And whatever you think of Article 2, how it's been worked through, how it's been proposed, I have to say I really like that on the flower of our newly expressed values, there's a petal for generosity. And the words used to describe it are both beautiful and helpful to me. Generosity, we cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. Let's take a moment to savor those words. Generosity itself is so rich. It shares a root with words like generational and genesis. And the root gen means birth and production. And isn't there something generative about really good generosity, leading to love and resilience in any community it's part of? I do think that gratitude comes along with good generosity. It's when we step back and acknowledge the good and beauty in our lives that we can give out of abundance instead of scarcity, that we give more fully because there's a thanks, there's a gracia, there's a gratitude and grace involved. But how about hope? Often we are in a time when we don't really know if we are giving into abundance. We don't know the future. Almost exactly 4 years ago, on March 20th, 2020, we put up our first joint BAJA 4 worship service together, not knowing what the future held, not knowing what would happen in this pandemic, or when our churches would meet again. We had to plant seeds of hope, take that risk and be vulnerable. But isn't that also part of the balancing act of generosity? As we discussed generosity, the BAJA 4 ministers came up with another word, boundaries. When we give, there has to be boundaries. Mother Teresa talks about giving until it hurts. I really don't like that phrase. I like the idea of giving until you're out of your comfort zone and risking growth. And even if you feel like you're giving, you also have to do some change and hard work in yourself. But giving until you're depleted and can't breathe, that is too much. That is unboundaried giving. And what about giving until the gift is what is needed? Those who are receiving generosity have to say what they need and want. I walked through a banana plantation in 2000 and saw a pristine, carefully constructed house and wondered why no one lived in it when this was soon after Hurricane Mitch and many houses were needed. And I was told that a country that had generously decided to give 1% of its gross national product to others in need had come and created this house and put it there in the plantation, never asking cultivators of bananas what they needed to live in. And so the house was useless to them and stood empty. We have to ask, we have to hear, we have to tell. There are boundaries to generosity. And as I explored research about generosity, the organizational psychologist Adam Grant has given me 3 new words: that most people are either takers, matchers, or givers in organizations. Takers want to put as little effort in to take as much out for themselves. And they like to take as much of the credit as possible without sharing it. Often you will see a report about a company, and if the CEO has a whole spread for his or her photo, be wary. They may well be takers. But if their picture doesn't show up at all, If the font in their name is tiny, this means they're sharing credit. They may be givers. Most of us are matchers. We give to those people we know can give back to us. We don't waste our resources, which are precious, on people who can't reciprocate. Most of us are matchers. But the givers are both the most successful and often the least successful people in an organization. It depends on how you give. If you give because you just don't know how to say no, if you give until you're exhausted and depleted and you don't have a goal in mind, really you are giving to receive back, to receive love, attention, to never let anyone down. That's kind of an unboundaried giving that isn't helpful. In my, as a minister, I've often had boundary training, and my favorite awareness came one year when we discussed trying to be superhuman. We're tempted to give as much as we give and also promise more than we could deliver. But if we do that, if we try to put on capes and give everything possible, we will let people down. There's another word we need to embrace, and that is humility. Not because we need to be ashamed or crushed down, but because of humus and dirt and earth. We, as Unitarian Universalists, need to be grounded in this earth, in this world that we want to heal and help to grow. And so we need to remember our limitations and not promise what we can't deliver. But then there are givers who truly give out a sense of joy and for a purpose. They give because they love the people they're helping. They don't really care if the networking they offer helps them in any way. They are giving to something larger, like science or denomination, and that in itself is its own reward. Now, I don't want to pat us on the back and say how amazing we are, but I do believe that as the BAJA 4, we stepped out in faith and vulnerability. We never counted in a matchy way, tit for tat, what we were giving. We never said, well, you're a bigger church and you're smaller and you're giving more and you're giving less. We just gave out of gratitude for having each other, for having other resources and churches and musicians and religious educators to work with. We gave blessed by the members of our congregation who also gave of their art and their music and their crazy videos with flying objects. We were blessed by being generative together and never counting fully the cost, because we aimed for something larger. Not only our individual churches, not only the BAJA 4, but a faith that tries to make sense of this world and heal it, working in community together. May we continue to do that. May we be generous and generative. May we have good boundaries and hope and show vulnerability and gratitude for each other. May we, blessed be.
Okay. I only have one paper here. Are there others? Okay. This is actually a sorrow from Sally Carpenter for Ken Anderson. Ken Anderson is grieving the loss of his older brother who passed away yesterday. In Marble Falls, Texas, rest in peace, Douglas Leon Anderson. Very sad. A second sorrow I was going to bring up just briefly was that we've had another fire in Bisbee. I think most of you have heard about it. It was on Main Street. And the real issue is Bisbee's a historic town. And the two businesses that burned affected all the businesses around them. And they have blocked Main Street for, has it been 2 weeks now?
But you can walk around, there are just a few churches buildings you can't get to, because Christopher and I keep walking there.
Well, and they get real excited because there are safety issues. Those buildings, have asbestos in the walls. The bricks aren't structurally sound. So they have big equipment up to start at the top and demolish these buildings. But the concern that I'm trying to bring up is for the rest of the businesses that are on Main Street. It's the beginning of tourist season. Some of them are permanently closed. So if you have some spare time and you run to Bisbee, please buy something from the shops that are open, because it's really devastating. So you have
Yes, there's a sorrow that was submitted to me at 10 o'clock last week. I don't look at my phone. From Yandi Nelson. I think it was the 11th, which was her 83rd birthday. She was in a head-on collision. She is okay. She is alive. She's getting help. She's healing every day. But she wanted our good thoughts for her, because this is... and I have a joy. Yesterday was my sister's and brother-in-law's 40th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And I remembered to call her, and she was shocked.
40 years, same person.
Yes.
I'll put some stones in.
Yesterday, we got our 14th great-grandbaby
Oh.
from 4 grandchildren, and we still have 5 grandchildren that have not started reproducing.
So I just want to repeat that so people on Zoom can hear this. Becky and Ken just had their 14th great-grandchild yesterday. Yay.
Some people brag. These are
I'm ashamed almost.
stones for all the joys and sorrows left unsaid.
We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Hi, friends. As the BAJA 4 coordinator and ministerial intern, I was tasked with reviewing our years as the BAJA 4. And to be honest, I'm not sure I'm up to this task. I'm not sure anyone's up to this task. So I'm sitting at the UUCT Welcome Center in front of our painting, which reads, "We are as varied as the blooms of the Sonoran Desert," looking for some inspiration. We say this saying every week in worship in our welcome words, and it feels fitting as a reflection on the BAJA 4. Not only are we as unique as the blooms, we created the BAJA 4 through radical generosity and welcome. This collective that we are creating together is unique, maybe in the world, in at least 2 ways. Each congregation has welcomed all the others in their doors. And I mean this literally. We have experienced our ministers rotating where they lead worship on Sundays. We have congregants just stop by on a Sunday morning because they want to hear the exciting topic a different worship team has prepared. And second, we have invited each other to much-loved social and justice activities. People from across the region and far beyond our region stop by things like our discussion groups, our coffee hours, and our programs. And ultimately, the time-consuming labor of love, it didn't actually have to work out. Maybe it's a miracle that it did. Thing that we're creating, we come together as a community, rooted only in our commitments to each other and to living our values out loud. It didn't have to work, and yet it does. We have created something that is more than the sum of its parts. In this way, the BAJA 4 has some of the hallmarks of a concept in sociology that is called the third place. The first 2 social environments that a person regularly engages in are home and, for a lot of us, work. We tend to seek, however, an additional place, which sociologist Ray Oldenburg calls the third place. He wrote, "The third place is a generic designation for a variety of public places that host the regular voluntary, informally, and happily anticipated gatherings of individuals beyond the realms of home and work. He continues, examples of third places include churches, cafes, bars, clubs, community centers, public libraries, gyms, bookstores, makerspaces, stoops, parks, theaters, opera houses, among many others. And as we witness these institutions in decline, we know how much more important it is that we have a third place that we call the Baja 4. Ray Oldenburg argues that third places are important for civil society, for democracy, civic engagement, and establishing feelings of a sense of place. 4 years ago, so many of us experienced a collapse in our third places. As we began working from home, we also began homing at what was now our workplace. We might have sought out safer out of our homes, locations such as parks and mountains to supplement our spaces. And for many of us, the third space became online. We knew each other only in these little Zoom boxes. I've known some of you only in this square. Oldenburg reminds us, though, that whether they are virtual or literal, all third spaces are important for our social and emotional well-being. And how do we measure the impact of our third space, the Baja 4? What metric can we accurately use? The hours of programming that we have created, maybe. The friendships that are emerging and the number of connections made. The gigabytes of film footage of our leaders doing all manner of silly and sometimes serious things. The number of miles we have driven between our congregations. The hours of Zoom calls that have kept us safe and connected across space. And the on-the-fly learning of how to use Zoom and the other pesky technologies. Maybe we just count the last 4 years in love. If you have ever come to an event with me, I'm asking you now, remind me to take pictures. These images that I want to show you are just a few of the many big and small things we have done together over the years, which I just regularly forget to take pictures of. We've have our T-Birds and our winter visitors events. We've had safety trainings. We've had trips to the splash pads and Humane Society fundraising and so much more that I've forgotten to take pictures of. So what is the future of our collective? We have some concrete ideas. For example, there's a team of us plotting how we can teach a cohort of a new program called Creating Theology Together next fall. It will invite more of us into a discussion of beliefs, philosophies, and ideas about what that which is most important to us means to us. Religious exploration will start a year of study of the world's religions. Youth and adults will have the chance to learn about these faiths and then visit a few houses of worship. We hope to expand our public witness. Building on the momentum of the Tucson Festival of Books, we plan to attend Pride in Bisbee and Tucson and see what other events come up that we can live our values in the world. And you can have as big or small of a part in these events as you're moved to. Join the Baja 4 newsletter and you'll see updates every week on what's happening across the region. But however much or little you engage with the Baja 4, all of us can experience belonging in all three spaces: home, work, church. But maybe we need to consider that we've added not only a third space, another third space, but maybe a fourth space, the Baja 4, a community holding your community in a loving embrace. For me, this is what the call to freely and compassionately share our faith and presence and resources means. We welcome each other. We give and receive as much as we comfortably, responsibly can of our time, talent, and treasures. We embrace our differences and our commonalities to create a culture of generosity than one of obligation. Generosity is an invitation to join in. Won't you join?
As we gather our offering today, we will hear an anthem, one voice, sung by the Mountain Vista UU Congregational Choir. Why do you think they didn't ask us to sing that? I'm so offended. Accompanied by Chris Tackett. Remember, today we have two offerings. One is for the work of this church, and the second is the EAF.
This is the sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice, the sound of one who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of voices too. The sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of all of us, singing for the beautiful stars. Leave the rest behind and turn to dust. This is the sound of us. This is the sound of This is the sound of one voice, one people, one voice, a song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice.
Religions are far from infallible. There are transient elements in the way we worship and boundaries which we cannot or will not yet see or confront as people of faith. These are borderlands, places where we are challenged by the different and strange. What do we find difficult to see? Who among us has the vision? What revelations hover in our hearts and minds? These are the edges of the future. This wisdom comes to us from my dear colleague and the first called minister of Mountain Vista UU, the Reverend Susan Manker Seal. 30 years ago, she helped to gather ministers of our congregations for a once-a-month lunch, a gathering that continues to today. That group had no way of predicting that we would extend and deepen their ministry together and become a collaboration of 4 congregations. They just knew that they needed each other, deeply needed one another, needed to celebrate their congregation's changes and challenges together, needed to commiserate the transient and fallibility of congregational life together. These early colleagues were in the borderlands of ministry, on the edge of the future, and the relationship they formed would come to be our trajectory. Since those early gatherings, and through shared events and workshops and projects like hosting the Justice District Assembly, like the plethora of our pulpapaloozas, the global pandemic, we have come together and discovered that our congregations need one another as well. And that can be hard to perceive, that we are more than interconnected congregations, that we are interdependent. Does that sound odd? In a society that prizes the individual and holds independence at the core of success, dependence may sound different or strange. It might even sound like a weakness. Needing one another might draw attention away from our individual congregations. It might distract our different congregations from distinct church events and workshops and projects. It could even divert resources of the time and the talent and the treasure from our community to what? To cake and t-shirts? Well, thankfully, scarcity behind such thoughts is not a part of our faith tradition, but generosity is. Since their very first meeting, those ministers years ago, they had held generosity at our core. As our history of celebration and commiseration and collaboration exemplifies, here in the Baja 4, generosity is generative. It answers and it amplifies. For years, the simple generosity of sharing their time at a meal each month answered the needs of our community ministers for collegiality. It amplified their individual ministries while they wandered in those in-between spaces. By their example, the generosity of our congregation's shared time and talent and treasure has brought us together, taking our faith out to meet thousands of people, as we just did with Tucson Book Festival and as we are starting to do with Pride Fest. We have shared in our whole lives training so that together we offer comprehensive, science-based, age-appropriate, accurate sex and sexuality curriculum to youth and to our elders throughout our broader community. Generosity has brought us to worship at the border, to sing, and to lament the ongoing injustice of immigration throughout the border community here in Arizona. It amplifies as we partner with those who would save the lives of migrants in the desert and accompany asylum seekers here in our urban areas. Today, our generous collaboration answers harassment and intimidation directed to our congregations for expressing these very values and living our faith in the broader community with an interdependent strength. Together, we amplify safety, showing up for one another, and engaging in training that addresses digital and mental health first aid and physical threats. We are safer and we are stronger together. And what might our Baja 4 generosity bring us tomorrow as we move into an election year as we anticipate undemocratic, hateful, even vicious rhetoric in our news feeds and at our very doorsteps. Well, having served our Baja 4 congregations for over 10 years now, I don't have that answer. And here in our Baja 4 collaboration, there's no reason why I should. Ours is a collaboration of many, many people in a shared ministry emerging from each individual congregation dependent upon one another. For direction, then, I turn in these borderlands of our times to Reverend Susan again and the lived example that she had alongside so many ministers, religious educators, music directors, administrators, custodians, boards, lay leaders, members, friends, guests, children, to ask the questions that only we can answer together. What do we find difficult to see among us and out in our society? And how will we confront it? Who among us has new and renewed vision for tomorrow, and how will we enact it together? And what revelations hover in our minds and our hearts, and how will we bring these to life together as the Baja 4? There are things that will come and go. There's styles and fashions of worship that will change. And the challenges that we face as Unitarian Universalists will always shift and move. But our answer and our amplification has always been and will always be the generosity of our spirit. As I have been taught to say, Amen, Ashe, Aho. May it be so, because we choose it to be.
Welcome, Pastor Inga, to Borderlands UU and the Baja 4. I am thrilled beyond belief that you have found a shared ministry together. As you begin this ministry together, I just have one piece of advice for you. Lean in. Borderland, you have been leaning in as this Baja 4 collaboration has grown and strengthened over the years. You have been part of what makes the Baja 4 strong, and you have also been held by the Baja 4 at times when you've needed to be held. And Inga, as a member of UUCT for a little while now, you have been part of what makes our congregation, what makes the net of the Baja 4 strong. And you have also been held by the Baja 4 and by UUCT as you've been exploring your Unitarian Universalist identity. As you continue in your shared ministry together, keep leaning in. Lean into the relationships we have with each other as colleagues, as congregations. Lean into our shared offering on our shared resources. Lean in when things are easy and when things are hard, when you really want to and when you'd really rather not. Just lean in. We are here to hold you. You, all together, make us stronger.
Welcome, Reverend Inga, to Borderlands, to the Baja 4, and to ministry in Unitarian Universalism. I have so enjoyed being part of a denomination that people kind of get. No more will you have to say to people, it's United Church of Christ. We do have instruments in worship. It's kind of like Presbyterian. No, welcome to ministry in a denomination that people kind of get. A few weeks ago, I was at the Festival of Books in Tucson at the Baja 4 table, and a young woman walked up, and she said that she was a pagan, but it was getting lonely doing ritual alone, and that we might have something for her. I handed her information about UUCT and their CUPS group. A couple days ago, a man came up to me after a meeting and said, I'm going to tell you something I don't share often in Cochise County. I'm an atheist. And I said, you'd be welcome at our church. And he said, I know, that's why I'm going to stop by. So welcome, Inga. I hope you feel as loved and welcomed as I have been by these wonderful ministers, these amazing congregations, and a denomination where you can say what you mean and mean what you say. Welcome.
Hi, Pastor Inga. I'm here at UUCT in our children's library, and I'm thinking about how each of our congregations is like a bookshelf. There are so many stories to be told. Each one of them is different and unique and special, and each one of them makes our bookshelves whole. And without them, without each of these books, we don't have a library. The Baja 4 is like that. We have so many stories, so much potential to develop. We will never read all of it, but we welcome you to try it out.
To paraphrase from The Princess Bride, love them as I have loved them, Reverend Inga, and there will be joy.
Inga, have some cake. Welcome.
Welcome, Inga.
Now, I know a lot of us are going to say the same things about the Baja 4, how wonderful it is, how we really are stronger together. I think we're a little bit sweeter together. I know we're all eating cake, but I say, why have eggs and flour and sugar? Skip all of that and go straight for the chocolate. Welcome, Pastor Inga.
Hello, Baja 4. I just want to thank you for such a beautiful welcome. I so appreciate your words of wisdom, and I don't have a cake yet, but I know I'm going to get one. So in the meantime, cheers with the Oreo.
Our closing words were written by the Reverend Amy Zucker Morgenstern, who is parish minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Palo Alto, California. When we take fire from our chalice, it does not become less, it becomes more. And so we extinguish our chalice, but we take its light and warmth with us, multiplying their power by all of our lives and sharing it with the world. How beautiful. Go in peace and love. Namaste.